The sea had been whispering for weeks before it finally took the church. Waves climbed the cliffs like claws, dragging mist and salt through the graveyard gates. Isla Rowan stood among the broken stones, her lantern trembling in her hand, listening to the choir that no one else could hear. Beneath the surface, where the chapel once stood, voices rose, soft, pleading, beautiful. The bells still tolled underwater, marking hours that no longer existed. They said faith could outlast the storm, but Isla knew better. Some prayers don't reach heaven, some sink and wait to be answered from below. The first light of dawn broke over the restless sea, casting a pale glow that barely pierced the thick morning mist. Clara Mallory stood at the water's edge, her breath fogging in the crisp air as she watched the impossible unfold before her eyes. Slowly, like a ghostly apparition from a forgotten past, the sunken village began to rise. Jagged rooftops pierced the mist, skeletal wooden beams creaked as they emerged from beneath the waves, and the once submerged earth broke the surface with a reluctant sigh. Clara's heart pounded, not from exertion but from a strange cocktail of awe and unease. For 100 years, the village had slept beneath the cold, silent depths, swallowed by the capricious sea. Now it returned, as if summoned by some ancient tide that no living soul could fully understand. This was no ordinary phenomenon. It was a resurrection, a revival of memories soaked in salt and sorrow. She stepped cautiously into the shallow water, the chill biting through her sturdy boots as she waded toward the first row of houses. The wooden frames, softened and warped by years underwater, groaned beneath the weight of time. Barnacles and seaweed clung stubbornly to the surfaces, their presence a testament to the village's long dormancy. Clara's fingers brushed against a broken window frame, rough with encrusted shells and algae, and she shivered despite the sun's tentative warmth. The air was thick with a silence that felt unnatural, a heavy stillness that pressed against her chest. As she moved deeper into the village, she became aware of faint sounds, whispers that could have been the wind or something far more unsettling. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled soft, mournful, and impossibly real. Clara froze, her eyes searching the horizon, but there was no sign of a bell tower, no living soul to ring such a call. Her gaze was drawn inexorably toward the heart of the village, where the drowned church stood defiantly amidst the ruins. Its stone walls, though cracked and waterlogged, remained stubbornly intact. Through the shattered stained glass windows, Clara glimpsed the altar submerged beneath a thin veil of water. The colors of the glass refracted into ghostly patterns that danced in the dying light. A cold wind stirred the water, sending ripples that distorted the reflections, and for a moment, Clara thought she saw a shadow move beneath the surface. Her breath caught. Was it a trick of light, or was something watching her from the depths? Determined, she pulled her jacket tighter and stepped closer. Her journal, worn and water-stained, hung from her shoulder, a testament to years of research and unanswered questions. This village, lost to time and tide, held the key to truths she needed to uncover. About the curse, the faith shattered beneath the waves, and the fate of those who had prayed within the drowned church. As the day wore on, Clara explored the skeletal remains of the village, each step echoing in the hollow silence. The buildings whispered stories in the creaks of their timbers and the groans of aged stone. The water lapped gently against the ruins, a constant reminder of the power that had swallowed this place whole. Yet, beneath the surface, Clara felt a presence, a restless energy that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the tides. As twilight descended, casting long shadows across the deserted streets, Clara paused by the church's entrance. The stained glass glimmered faintly in the fading light, the images of saints and sinners blurred and distorted by time and water. The air grew colder, and Clara's breath came in shallow gasps. Suddenly, a splash broke the silence. Clara spun around, eyes wide, searching the darkening waters. For a fleeting moment, she saw a pale, waterlogged figure reflected in the ripples, a man in tattered priest robes, his eyes glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The apparition vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving Clara trembling and breathless. Her heart hammered as the realization settled over her. The village was not merely a relic of the past. It was alive in a way that defied reason, haunted by those who had once called it home. And the drowned church, silent and forbidding, stood at the center of a curse that refused to die. Clara pulled her jacket tighter, steeling herself against the creeping dread. This was only the beginning. The answers she sought were buried deep, beneath the water, beneath the stones, and beneath the shadows of faith and fear. The village had risen, but so had the darkness that clung to it. As night fell, the bells tolled once more, echoing through the mist like a dirge from the depths. Clara's resolve hardened. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. For the village, for the drowned souls, and for the sister she had lost to the merciless sea. The night was alive with secrets, and Clara Mallory was ready to face them all. Clara Mallory sat cross-legged on the warped floorboards of the dilapidated house, her lantern's warm glow flickering against the peeling wallpaper as she sifted carefully through a stack of brittle, water-stained papers. The sunken village, having resurfaced after 100 years, was a spectral reminder of a forgotten past, but Clara was determined to unearth its secrets. Each document she examined whispered fragments of a story darker than she had anticipated. The musty smell of damp wood and saltwater hung heavy in the air, mingling with the faint metallic scent of rusted nails and decayed timber. Outside, the gentle lapping of water against the submerged doorframe was a constant, rhythmic reminder of the village's watery grave. Clara's fingers trembled slightly as she traced faded ink, records of church meetings, parishioners' names, and cryptic notations hinting at rituals and warnings. "This can't just be folklore," she murmured to herself, eyes narrowing on a passage mentioning the curse that binds us beneath the waves. The words seemed to pulse with a life of their own, as if the paper bore the weight of centuries of suffering. A sudden chill swept through the room, causing Clara to pull her jacket tighter around her. From beyond the broken window panes, shadows danced erratically in the lantern light. She froze, every sense sharpening. A low murmur drifted faintly through the air, a chorus of whispered voices, barely audible over the lapping water. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled in response. "Who's there?" she called softly, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. No answer came, only the persistent susurrus of the water. Clara shook her head, trying to dispel the creeping dread. "It's just your imagination," she told herself, though the uneasy feeling lingered. Determined to gain perspective, Clara made her way toward the village docks the next morning, the wooden planks slick with moss and salt. There, she encountered Elia's Harrow, the local fisherman whose weather-beaten face and sturdy frame spoke of a lifetime spent battling the sea. Elias eyed her with a mixture of suspicion and reluctant recognition. "You shouldn't be pawkin' around here," he said gruffly, voice rough as the sea itself. "This place ain't meant for the living." Clara met his gaze steadily. "I need to understand what happened here, Elias. The curse, the church, there's something beyond the surface." He sighed, running a hand through his tangled gray hair. "The things buried here, they ain't meant to be disturbed. The village was cursed long ago. Folks tried to keep it secret, but the water took 'em all. And now, every time the village rises, the dead walk again." His words sent a shiver down Clara's spine. "The dead? You mean the spirits?" Elias nodded grimly. "Aye, bound to the church, cursed to roam until the debt is paid." That night, Clara wandered the waterlogged streets alone, the moon casting a silvery sheen over puddles reflecting skeletal trees and ruined rooftops. Her footsteps were muffled by the damp earth, and the only sound was the occasional drip of water from broken eaves. As she passed the churchyard, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A pale, translucent figure glided silently among the crooked tombstones, its mournful gaze fixing on her with a sorrow that transcended time. Clara's breath caught in her throat, heart hammering in terror and awe. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the apparition dissolved into the thick mist. She stood rooted to the spot, a profound sadness washing over her. "What binds you here?" she whispered into the night. Returning to her temporary quarters, Clara pored over her notes, the fragments of history coalescing into a chilling narrative. The curse was no mere legend. It was a relentless force, entwined with the faith and fanaticism that had doomed the village. Yet beneath the dread, a stubborn ember of hope burned within her, a hope that understanding the past might yet break the curse. But as the night deepened, the whispers beneath the water grew louder, promising that the village's secrets would not be uncovered without a price. And Clara was ready to pay it. The echoes beneath the water were awakening. Clara Mallory stood at the edge of the resurfaced village, her boots sinking slightly into the soft, mud-streaked earth as she gazed out over the skeletal remains of weathered boats and broken piers. The salty breeze tugged at her dark hair, carrying with it the faint, mournful cries of gulls circling overhead. The village was a ghost of its former self, its sunken past now laid bare by the century-old waters retreating. Yet despite the eerie stillness, Clara could feel the restless breath of history whispering through the air, beckoning her deeper into the secrets long submerged. As she took in the scene, a figure approached from the shadow of a derelict boathouse. Weather-beaten and sturdy, the middle-aged man moved with the cautious confidence of someone who had spent decades at sea, his face etched with lines carved by wind and salt. Elias Harrow, the local fisherman she had heard about from old records and scattered rumors, stopped a few paces away, eyeing her with a mixture of wariness and reluctant acceptance. "You're the historian, aren't you?" Elias' voice was gravelly but steady. "Clara Mallory," she nodded, holding out a hand. "That's me. I came to learn the truth about this village, the church, and the curse that's haunted it." Elias hesitated before shaking her hand. "Truth's a dangerous thing around here. The village's past isn't just stories for the fire, it's blood and water and broken promises." Clara felt a chill despite the cool breeze. "I understand, but that's why I'm here. To uncover it, no matter the cost." Elias studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward the village's heart. "Come, I'll tell you what I know, but heed my warning. Some secrets aren't meant for the living." They walked together along the cracked stone path, stepping carefully over fragments of wood and glass that jutted from the earth like the bones of a long-dead beast. The village was a labyrinth of memories, each structure a relic of a life interrupted by the unforgiving floodwaters. Reaching a small, dimly lit tavern, Elias pushed open the door, and the scent of damp wood and stale ale greeted them. A single candle flickered on a rough-hewn table, casting long shadows that danced across the peeling wallpaper. Clara settled opposite Elias, her notebook ready. "The village wasn't always swallowed by the sea," Elias began, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Long ago, these people were devout, faithful beyond measure, but desperation drove them to dark corners, to bargains they shouldn't have made." He paused, eyes clouded with memory. "A pact with forces beyond understanding to save their lives when the waters rose. But that pact came at a terrible price." Clara leaned forward, heart pounding. "What kind of price?" Elias' gaze flicked towards the window, where the last light of dusk bled into the sky. "A curse, one that binds their souls to the drowned church, condemning them to rise again when the village resurfaces. They're trapped between worlds, neither living nor dead." The room seemed to close in around Clara, the weight of his words settling like a stone in her chest. "And the vengeful priest, he was the one who led them into that pact," Elias said grimly. "A man twisted by faith and betrayal. Now he commands the restless spirits, punishing those who dare disturb their slumber." Outside, a sudden gust rattled the window panes, carrying with it a faint murmur, the echoes of prayers and laments long forgotten. Clara shivered and scribbled furiously in her notebook, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fit together. After a long silence, Elias stood. "There's more you need to see. Come with me." They left the tavern and walked toward the skeletal remains of a half-submerged home. The air grew heavier with the scent of brine and decay, mingling with the faintest trace of incense. Elias' voice dropped to a reverent murmur. This was where the villagers made their final stand before the flood took them all. The betrayal, the fear, it's etched into these walls. Clara reached out to touch the waterlogged timber, feeling the cold seep into her skin. How did they betray themselves? "They turned on each other," Elias said, eyes distant. "Sacrificed some for the survival of others. The priest preached salvation, but it was twisted salvation, stained with blood and fear." A silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the ruins. Clara's thoughts spun, the image of the vengeful priest and the villagers' fate intertwining with her own haunted memories of Tommy. When Elias finally left her at the village edge, Clara stayed behind, the wind stirring the tattered remains of a forgotten flag. Alone, she wandered through the ruins, her journal in hand, each step echoing with the whispers of the past. The sun dipped below the horizon, and shadows stretched long and thin across the broken streets. Clara's heart beat faster, not just from the chill, but from the growing certainty that the curse was not just a tale, but a living nightmare awaiting her next move. As she paused beside the shattered steps of the church, a faint voice seemed to rise from the depths, a prayer, a warning, a plea. Clara closed her eyes, the weight of history pressing down, and resolved to face whatever darkness awaited her. For the truth, for Tommy, for the souls trapped beneath the waves, and somewhere deep within the drowned village, unseen eyes watched her, waiting. The cold water lapped against Clara Mallory's boots as she stepped cautiously into the shallow basin surrounding the sunken church. The air was thick with the salty tang of the sea, mingled with the faint, musty scent of old wood and damp stone. She pulled her jacket tighter around her, the fabric clinging heavily now that it was soaked, but her eyes remained fixed on the dark silhouette of the church's remains rising from the water like a ghostly monument. For 100 years, this village had slept beneath the waves, forgotten and hidden, its stories buried with it. But now, as the ocean relinquished its hold, the village surfaced once more, skeletal and silent, save for the soft lapping of the tide and the occasional cry of distant gulls. Clara's heart thudded with a blend of excitement and apprehension. This was more than history. It was a living, breathing enigma waiting to be unraveled. Beside her, Elias Harrow adjusted the brim of his weather-beaten hat, his gaze scanning the ruined structures. "Don't get too close," he warned, voice rough like gravel. "This place, it's not just old bones and broken timbers. It's got eyes, and it don't like strangers poking around." Clara offered a faint smile but remained focused. "I have to see the altar, Elias. If there's any clue to the curse, it'll be there." He grunted but didn't argue further. Together, they waded through the shallow waters, the cold biting through their layers as they neared the church's foundation. The water was murky, stirred up by their movements, but through the haze, Clara could make out the jagged edges of stone walls and fallen beams. Then there it was, the altar. Miraculously intact, it stood submerged beneath only a few feet of water, its surface coated with algae and silt, but unmistakably whole. Clara knelt at the edge, dipping her gloved hands into the chilly water, brushing away debris with careful strokes. The altar was carved from dark stone, its edges softened by time, but the intricate patterns, faint crosses, entwined vines, and cryptic symbols were still visible. "This is incredible," Clara whispered, heart pounding. "It's like it's been waiting for someone to find it." Elias shifted uneasily. "Waiting or warning, you mean? There's things better left alone in this world, Clara. Those carvings, they're not just decorations. They're bindings." She looked up from the altar, meeting his eyes. "Bindings for what?" He hesitated, then spoke in a low, urgent tone. "For the curse that drowned this village. For the sins the priest thought he could wash away with blood and water." The weight of his words settled over her, mingling with the cold that seeped into her bones. Clara's fingers traced the faded inscriptions, trying to decipher their meaning. Each symbol seemed to pulse faintly beneath her touch, like a heartbeat echoing through stone and water. A sudden chill swept over the clearing, raising goosebumps along her arms. She glanced up to see the sky shifting, the sun dipping lower, casting long shadows that flickered across the water's surface. The altar began to glow, a subtle, eerie light shimmering beneath the waves, as if the past itself was stirring awake. "Clara," Elias warned, voice tight with unease. "We shouldn't stay here after dark. This place, it feeds on the restless." But Clara was already captivated, caught between awe and an unshakable sense of dread. The altar was no mere relic. It was a threshold, a reminder that the village's dark history was not simply buried beneath the waves, but waiting to be confronted. As the last light slipped below the horizon, Clara felt the first whisper of something ancient brush against her mind, a prayer half remembered, a lament carried on the wind. The village was waking, and with it the curse. She rose slowly, her eyes never leaving the glowing altar. "I need to know more," she said softly. "Whatever it takes." Elias nodded grimly. "Then we're both in deeper than we thought." Together, they turned away from the altar, the shadows stretching long and dark behind them, the water around the church rippling as though stirred by unseen hands. The night was closing in, and with it, the haunting presence of the drowned church grew stronger. Clara's journal entry later that night would capture the moment. The altar remains, untouched by time or tide, a silent witness to the sins and prayers of a lost village. Its carvings speak in symbols I cannot yet fully understand, but their message is clear. This place holds power, ancient and dangerous. The water that once claimed the village now cradles its secrets, but I fear those secrets are restless, waiting to rise again. Tomorrow, I delve deeper. The chapter closes on Clara's determined gaze, the faint glow of the altar still echoing in her mind, setting the stage for the terrifying truths yet to come as the village's past claws its way to the surface. The night had settled over the sunken village like a shroud, thick and suffocating. Clara Mallory moved carefully through the waterlogged streets, the beam of her lantern wavering in the cold breeze that whispered secrets no living voice dared to speak aloud. She had waited for the darkness to fall, knowing that the village's true face, the one hidden beneath layers of history and water, revealed itself under the cloak of night. Her heart thrummed with a mixture of fear and relentless curiosity. The church loomed ahead, its skeletal frame jutting from the shallow waters like a monument to forgotten sorrow. Clara's boots sank slightly into the muddy ground as she waded toward the entrance, the wooden doors hanging crooked on their rusted hinges. The air was thick with the scent of rot and salt, a pungent reminder of the centuries the village had spent swallowed by the sea. Steeling herself, she pushed open the doors and stepped inside. The lantern's light danced across broken pews and shattered stained glass, casting fractured colors onto the water that pooled across the floor. The altar, though battered, remained intact, a silent sentinel amidst ruin. Clara's breath hitched as the weight of unseen eyes settled upon her. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, a cold so deep it gnawed at her bones. From the shadows at the far end of the nave, a figure emerged. Pale and gaunt, his features distorted by the relentless embrace of water, he wore tattered priestly robes that clung to his skeletal frame. His eyes glowed faintly, twin embers burning with a fury that transcended death. Clara froze, the lantern trembling in her grasp. The vengeful priest's mouth moved, but his voice was like the echo of a funeral bell tolling beneath the waves, low, hollow, and filled with accusation. "You trespass where the dead remain bound. Turn back, lest you join their ranks." The oppressive aura of his presence pressed down on her, a suffocating embrace that threatened to drown her in despair. Yet beneath the terror, a spark of defiance kindled within Clara. She swallowed her fear, lifting her chin. "I seek to free you," she whispered, voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "To break the curse that chains you here." The spirit's eyes flared brighter, a tempest of wrath and sorrow. "Foolish child," he intoned, "the curse is eternal, born of faith betrayed and blood spilled beneath the tide. You cannot undo what was wrought by fire and water." Clara took a cautious step forward, the water swirling around her ankles as if stirred by unseen hands. "I do not believe in curses without end. There is always hope, forgiveness, redemption." For a heartbeat, the priest's visage softened. An echo of the man he once was before fanaticism and betrayal twisted his soul. Then, with a final, spectral wail, he dissolved into the mist, leaving Clara alone in the flooded sanctuary. Her lantern flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the drowned village. The encounter had shaken her, but it had also steeled her resolve. The curse was real, and its guardian was terrifying beyond measure, but Clara knew she had to face this darkness head-on. As she retraced her steps out of the church, the water around her feet rippled gently, as if the village itself was watching, waiting, and breathing beneath the surface. The night was far from over, and the battle for the souls trapped within the drowned church had only just begun. Clara's journal would later record every detail of this night, her words trembling with the weight of what she had faced. Yet beneath the dread, there was a fragile thread of hope, a belief that even the darkest curse could be broken by courage and compassion. The vengeful priest was no longer a distant legend. He was a living nightmare, and Clara was determined to confront him, no matter the cost. The village whispered its secrets in the rising wind, the water lapping at the edges of the church like the fingers of the past reaching out to claim her. But Clara would not turn away. The curse demanded an answer, and she was ready to find it.